Can you all hear me? Yes, okay. Great. Well, welcome everyone to the body of Adam. Let's get this. Let me read to you in our exploration of the Garden of Eden. I'm going to read to you that is essentially translations that I've made from the same source that we've been studying from, the Leshem Rabbi Shlomo Eliashiv, who once again wrote this in the beginning of the 20th century. And he was a Talmudic Kabbalist from Lithuania in the tradition of the Gaon of Vilna. But first, here's a quote from another one of the most famous Kabbalists and Talmudists, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, who lived about 250 years ago in Italy, and then in Amsterdam, and then in Israel, where he passed away. Regarding this verse, God took Adam and placed him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to guard it. The Ramchal, as he is known as, wrote, "Certainly no verse can be divorced from its plain meaning. The trees were trees, the fruit was fruit, and the act of eating was eating. The fruit and the act of eating were so subtle, however, that our thoughts cannot imagine their true properties. We are only capable of imagining things of a corporeal nature." Now, he's not using the modern terms, but truly this is what he is referring to. It has to do with higher and lower dimensionality. That everything in Scripture, particularly in this case dealing with Adam in the garden, are all literally true. However, they are not true in this dimension. Now you see right away how this runs in the face of a fundamentalist Christian view that believe that the Bible is the literal word of God and every word is true. The Torah says yes, but not in this reality as we know it. Certainly not the events of the Garden of Eden. It is literally true in a higher dimension. And that's why, for one who really wants to get a grasp to the point where you can actually put your hand on it and grab it, you must have some knowledge of dimensionality. And there are many wonderful books, secular books on the subject. It's completely kosher to learn from these books because you're just, as it were, learning like mathematics. And there are books that are essentially higher dimensionality for dummies. Actually,
that's it.
Yeah, I think I'll have to contact
Copyrighted quick.
the company there. That I cannot emphasize how many problems this would solve. And unfortunately, even people whose hearts are in the right place, as observant Jews or observant Noachites, if one doesn't have some of the modeling that is offered through an understanding of higher and lower dimensionality as it relates to the field of mathematics and cosmology and modern physics, yes, if you have the faith, you believe it. You say, I don't fully understand it, but I know it's true. Well, that's a high level. But there's a much higher level, and that is to have conscious understanding. And so, if you hear the calling to, if it's something that's always been itching underneath your skin, in your heart and in your mind, to like really know, now what's really going on there? I got to know what this is really all about. The whole story of the Garden of Eden and so many other events. Then I highly recommend just going to a bookstore, looking in the section, or going online and just look for books on higher, lower dimensionality made simple. And one of the best ones is, I'll get it.
One of the best ones. I know. But guess what it is? My holographic universe. Elegant universe? Do you know which one it is?
There's one called hyperspace.
Hyperspace. Yeah. What is it?
Here's one book that I highly recommend. It's anybody. You don't have to be a mathematician, and it's written in a kind of a fun, humorous way. It's by Clifford Pickover, Pickover, who's a brilliant scientist. And this book is entitled Surfing Through Hyperspace: Understanding Higher Universes in 6 Easy Lessons. And it is replete with wonderful pictures and diagrams, and it is an introduction to higher dimensionality in a very painless way, even a fun way. I cannot recommend it enough, or any of the other books. Virtually, I can guarantee it will totally change your experience, give you the tools to change your entire experience of reality. And truly, this is so crucial for Torah. It's not by coincidence that everything in Torah as a Jew and a Noachite is based upon Hashem. Hashem is the name, formula. How many digits does it have? 4. Not 3, not 5. It has 4. It does have a 5th dimension, but that is attached to the Yud. That's the crown of the Yud. And it does work with it's a 4-dimensional structure, but fundamentally it's fundamentally a 4-dimensional, although it works as a 5-dimensional as well. And that's because the Torah is teaching us that everything here is embedded in 4 dimensions, 4 directions. And the one that we're aware of, the 1, 2, and 3, or 3-dimensional reality, is only part of the picture. Now, let me read to you a translation that I made from the Leshem in another section that some of the older students here have heard before. Surely we should have this memorized. We should be able to recite it in the middle of a conversation with a non-believer. They may quote from their Bible, but you're going to quote from a little-known arcane Kabbalistic work. Remember, and do not forget the transcendental level of all reality and the elevated stature of Adam HaRishon before the fall. Similar to human and animal life, vegetation itself, as well as the act of eating, was of a different nature altogether. All of these matters are completely beyond our present level of conceptualization. This is especially true regarding the tree of knowledge in Gan Eden. Even in the present soul world, also known as the lower Garden of Eden, there is absolutely no physical eating at all. What is he referring to? The soul world, that's also known as the lower Garden of Eden. When we die, that's where our souls go. They don't go to Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the next world, the incoming world. Souls go to the soul world, which has a upper part and a lower part. The lower part is what is variously known as hell. Or purgatory. But once again, these are not Torah terms. And essentially, it is where the parts of the soul. And remember, you don't have a soul. That's another misconception. Meaning, the soul is a spectrum of divinity that is fractaling up and down, scaling itself, and it has thousands and millions of different parts. And any part that's not been perfected yet, it goes to the part of the soul world called Gehinom. And the parts that have been perfected go to what's called the Garden of Eden. Now, this is not the Garden of Eden at the time of Adam. It's referred to, therefore, as the lower Garden of Eden.
What's it called in Hebrew?
It's called the Gan Eden HaTachton, the lower Garden of Eden. Now, the point he's making here is that even in the soul world, where parts of our soul go, there's no physical eating. He's saying all the more so in the higher dimensional Garden of Eden of Adam. That's the point that he's making. Returning to the text, this is true to an even greater degree regarding the exalted and elevated stature of Adam HaRishon and the level of reality that existed at that time. Now, although these matters recorded in the Torah are written in exact accord with their literal meaning, it is totally beyond our ability to grasp. There we go. Yeah, there's some little glitch. Got lost there. I'm back now. Can you hear me? Okay.
Ask him to go back a little bit.
Yeah, I'll go back. I'm not sure where we lost you. I'll go back a little bit. Now, although these matters recorded in the Torah are written in exact accord with their literal meaning, it is totally beyond our ability to grasp their true nature. This is due to the fact that the level of reality that existed at that time utterly and absolutely transcends our present consciousness to a degree that is inexpressibly awesome. Yet, from the time of the collapse until now, a devolutionary collapse has taken place in which an exact ratio has been retained. Key term, devolutionary. Do we believe in evolution? No. We believe in devolution. We have fallen, collapsed from higher dimensionality into this present form. Don't ask me now about dinosaurs, please. We'll save that for another time. It's another class. What is devolution? What is this devolutionary collapse that has fallen but yet maintains its exact ratio? It has proceeded in a completely isomorphic fashion. What does isomorphic mean? It means form-fitting. That's all. Isomorph. As a hand fits into a glove, the glove is isomorphic with the hand. The hand is isomorphic with the glove. These are my terms that I'm translating from the original text. It has proceeded in a completely isomorphic fashion from each subtle plane of existence to its corresponding grosser plane, which then devolved into its corresponding grosser mirror image almost ad infinitum. It has gone from soul to body, from body to garment, and from inner garment to outer garment, like a stamp that leaves its imprint on another stamp, which then leaves its imprint on another stamp, and so forth. Since each level must conform to the particular stage of reality to which it belongs, it is a lower manifestation of the level that precedes it. Nevertheless, it is an exact duplicate of the level that precedes it. It is in this way that the final and most exterior manifestation of these matters, as they are written in the Torah, are literally true. And this is sufficient for one who understands. Without this understanding as an axiom, the Bible, even for the good of heart and those with the true intentions, the Bible, certainly all the events mentioned in the beginning of Genesis, will always retain some aspect of Sunday school stories. And until one develops thought tools to understand it in a different way, in a higher way, that's the way it will remain. We have an obligation, responsibility to understand the Torah, even when it's at those places where it goes, you see all these red lights flashing, the signs say, do not enter. You can't understand this. This is not for you. It's not for you if you're using only your eyes of the three-dimensional world. If you learn how to see with four-dimensional seeing, then we can begin to glimpse into the utter awesomeness of what is going on in the Garden of Eden. And this is a responsibility. We no longer have the excuse. 100 years ago, 50 years ago, you had the excuse because you say, well, I haven't studied 10 years. I haven't studied Torah for 20 years. I haven't studied the Kabbalah, where I have been initiated into this inner way of seeing. Because now we have been given these tools. And as I've said, out of God's compassion for us is one way to understand it. That we all, those that are going to, as it were, survive to be able to transform into the next stage, the higher dimension, only those that will be able to flow with the transformation will survive. It's that simple. Now let me continue. The work that Adam was to perform was similar to that of the 10 emanations of divinity. Those are the Sephirot, as they exist now. Meaning that even before the 10 Sephirot is pure divinity. It's called from the world of Atzilut, the world, the dimension of pure emanation, which incidentally is the fourth dimension, put it in simple terms. That's why it is 4 worlds in Torah. The world of action, formation, creation, and then emanation. And now they are pure divinity. Before the fall, they were even more divinity than they are now. But in order to get a little grasp, what was Adam doing in the garden? When it says that he was put there to work it, what kind of work? Eating. The eating was the least of it. But truly, as we're going to see, he was commanded to eat. He was commanded to be consuming all of reality, but there were still laws of kashrut, believe it or not, in the Garden of Eden. So kashrut simply is what you can eat and what you cannot eat, meaning what you can elevate and what you cannot elevate. If you cannot elevate something, it is forbidden. If you can elevate it, it is permissible. The work that Adam was to perform was similar to that of the 10 emanations of divinity, the Sephirot of the world of emanation, as they exist now. Their service is to unite themselves in an awesome unity into the source of emanation, the infinite oneness, may his name be praised, and to annul themselves to him to the utmost possible degree, constantly and uninterruptedly. Their entire service involves taking the awesome unifications of the Torah and the mitzvot and elevating them higher and higher into the infinite unity. In other words, when we do Torah, we learn Torah and we do mitzvot, they are ascending through the dimensions. When they get to the world of emanation, Atzilut, then the 10 Sefirot take the energy that we have generated and it takes it even higher, all the way back into the source of the Ein Sof. In this way, they themselves are drawn even closer, eternally uniting into the unity of the infinite emanator, to the utmost degree of unity, enraptured in the bliss of his radiance. According to the exalted level that he was given at that time, Adam's service was supposed to mirror that of the Sefirot of Atzilut. Once again, we're getting a little glimpse. This ain't no human being. He was the Sefirot. Before the sin of the eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, all species of animals were gifted with intelligence and understanding. They also possessed many natural capabilities that Adam did not possess. These capabilities would therefore enable Adam to perform all the necessary and relevant activities involved in his rectification work, tikkun, of creation. Now, when we say that the animals were gifted with intelligence and understanding, we're not talking about Mr. Ed.
Weren't they inside of him at that time?
There was nothing that was outside of Adam. The animals were extensions of this Adamic consciousness reality. It would be as if we would refer to the organs of our bodies and the different systems, our metabolic system, the blood system, the nervous system, as the animals that serve us. And each one has its own consciousness and its own level. The animals in the Garden of Eden, once again, we have to fight the urge to picture it. When you fight the urge to picture it, you are in part fighting the urge to do avodah zarah. You are fighting the urge to worship idols. It's a subtle form of it. And it's okay to have the urge, and it's always going to keep coming up because that's what the brain wants to do. And you just have to say, down, boy. But anyone who's listening, if you take that book, the one book that I recommended, or any of the others, and you get yourself a simple foundation in dimensionality, you will be able to begin to see an actual sliver of a fractal of the animals in the Garden of Eden. And if you think you like dogs and cats, you haven't seen anything yet. Because these animals in the Garden of Eden, before the fall, they were on a higher level than the Chayot HaKodesh are now. Higher level than the Seraphim. Higher level than all those things that Ezekiel saw in his vision. The holy animals, the sacred animals. The animals of the Garden of Eden were higher than angels are today. Don't try to look. They weren't these little furry four-legged things. Neither were we little furry four-legged things either. Let me continue from the translation. All of them had complete mental faculties, and all of them spoke fluently. All the animals of the Garden of Eden. What language? They spoke Hebrew. And that should be an inspiration for all of us to study and learn Hebrew, because if those animals knew it, then certainly we should. In fact, as the Ramchal has written, before Adam's fall, all the animals were on the level of human beings today. Even after he was placed in the Garden of Eden, Adam would go out regularly and rectify all the other aspects of creation. His work consisted of unifying these aspects through all the activities of production and craftsmanship that were applicable to his dimension. This is what the Holy One meant when he said to him, "Be fruitful and multiply." What is this thing? Replenish the earth and subdue it. Utilize the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every living thing that crawls upon the earth. What does it mean to subdue it? This is not this Western concept of conquering, taking over nature.
Mitigate.
It means to mitigate it. It means to squeeze. The word kibshuha, kibush, in Hebrew, that term that's translated as to conquer, it also means to squeeze. It means to squeeze out the nitzotzot, the fractal sparks of divinity. That's what it means to truly conquer something. And by doing so, you are redeeming it, because you are now integrating it back into yourself, and thus you become the conduit to elevate it to a higher level. Adam was given permission to utilize all aspects of the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms throughout the entire world. Now, there are always 4 major layers, and they are the inorganic, or mineral level, the plant vegetable level, then the animal level, and then the human level. There's also a 5th level, the angelic level. And one way you can begin to grasp this a little bit, if you take your 2 hands and you put them together so the fingers are matching, and then you shift your fingers down 1 level, so that the finger that was, what you call this finger?
Index.
Well, your index finger is now overlapping your middle finger and all the way down. And you notice now your little pinky is hanging out in the middle of nowhere. Okay? Well, this is the fall. This is the collapse. Let your right hand represent the true layers of reality in their proper state. Okay, and then you match up your left hand with it. Now drop it down 1 layer, okay, as we just said. Don't worry about your thumb. Pay no attention. You drop down 1 layer, so your pinky is hanging out and suspended in space there. Well, this is what happened. All the 4 levels shifted, fell down to 1 level below them. So what was on your index finger, which was the true level, it fell down to the level below it, which means what was the true human form fell down into the level below it, which is what? The animal level. The animal fell into the plant fell into the mineral, and the mineral fell into the black hole of death. And that's why minerals and rocks appear to be dead, when in the Garden of Eden they were alive. Everything was alive. In simple terms, minerals were alive like plants are today. Plants in the Garden of Eden were like animals today. You could really forget about a pet rock. You got to have a real pet plant. And thus, what are humans today were really what we would call angelic entities. This is crucial to understand. This is not just a metaphor here. You see, this is kind of mathematical. Like we're building a structure of that enables us to think about that which we can't normally think about. This allows us to get a glimpse. And here's another little indication of this phenomenon that we have truly collapsed, and that our true self is a homo spiritus. We have fallen into homo sapiens. We've fallen into the bodies and the characteristics of animals. We're a mixture. That's what makes us so strange as these human beings. Because look at the structure. If you feel rocks, it's dead, cold. And you go up 1 level to plants. Very different in the texture. You go up to the next level up, animal skin, animal fur, radically different than anything in the plant kingdom. But you should thus expect, you see how each level is so distinct from the one above it and below it? You would think that when you would go from the animal level up to the next level, it should be radically distinct. And yet, we go up, and there's not that much of a distinction. It's the same kind of skin and hair and fur. I mean, if you could trick somebody, right? You took their hand, you know, you know, you go, are you touching now a human, or are you touching now an animal? You couldn't do that between a rock and a plant and a plant and an animal. And this is just a little illusion that we have collapsed from our true being, our true state, which was radically different than anything that is animal-like today. That's why you can, if someone who doesn't know any better, and doesn't have a Torah, doesn't have the revelation from above, because there's no way of knowing. Once you've collapsed down into a lower dimension, you cannot ever know that you have fallen from the higher dimension, because everything falls with you. What will you use as your control factor to be aware? Right now, if everything in the universe cut itself in half and became half the size, every atom, every molecule, every planet, every galaxy, it all happened simultaneously, would we be aware that anything shifted at all? No. And so that's why the Western world comes up with the idea of the naked ape. That's why it comes up with this whole concept of evolution, that we are just a naked ape. We're essentially an ape that lost his fur. Been trying to make sense out of it ever since. Back to the text. Adam was given permission to utilize all aspects of the mineral, vegetable, and animal kingdoms throughout the entire world. And once again, bear in mind, we're talking about his mineral, his vegetable, his animal kingdom. With regard to the mineral kingdom, he was to regularly extract new substances from the depths of the earth. You know, there's a little technique I developed. It's helpful initially. The word hyper means, you know, more than, like Stuart Super. When we talk about hyperspace, it just means more than our three-dimensional world. And so one way to get our heads to think differently, very differently, is you just put the word hyper in front of every word that you're reading, to remind you that you're not talking about it as it appears in our present reality. In other words, for example, let's take this verse from Genesis that we just read. Be fruitful and multiply. Replenish the earth, so we would go like this. Be hyper-fruitful and hyper-multiply. Replenish the hyper-earth and hyper-subdue it. Utilize the hyper-fish of the hyper-sea and the hyper-birds of the hyper-sky, and of every hyper-living thing that hyper-crawls upon the hyper-earth. Now, obviously it sounds a little funny, but it's a technique. It's a method to jar our concretized, collapsed perception and conception of reality. And so here also, with regard to the hyper-mineral kingdom, he was to regularly extract new hyper-substances from the hyper-depths of the hyper-earth. He was to quarry hyper-stones and hew them in order to build hyper-walls and hyper-towers. Once again, the lesson is using our language to describe the whole hyper-dimension of Adam. It's as if I were describing a cube by simply drawing a square, by simply drawing a line to represent a square, to represent a cube, to represent a hypercube. And I'm just going to now use lines. You see how this is representing this? But you notice the exact ratio is maintained? So it's literally true. He was to extract every precious metal from the bowels of the earth, such as iron, copper, silver, and gold. Then you ask yourself the rhetorical question, what was iron, copper, silver, and gold in the Garden of Eden before minerals collapsed and fell into their present form? This incidentally gives us now a basis to explore an ancient question. And that is, why are precious stones precious? Why is gold and silver valuable? What is the essence of gold and the essence of silver? What were these objects in the Garden of Eden before the fall? With regard to the plant kingdom, he was to plow and sow seeds, to plant trees and to cultivate every goodly fruit. With regard to the animal kingdom, he was given dominion over all the biodiversity of life, animals, birds, and fish. As explained by the Ari, all of these aspects of the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms were originally generated from the holy sparks that fell as a result of the shattering of the vessels. Okay, that's one of the terms used to refer to the primordial worlds, the strata of reality that precedes Genesis. It's not preceding it chronologically, although that's what it appears as, because there was no chronological time. Chronological time exists only in the fallen state. There's a layer that we're built out of. We are growing out of the primordial layer of reality. And Adam's job was, that's why when he was created in the Garden of Eden, it was far from finished. He had a heck of a lot of work to do. Even though he only had a couple hours of time left on Friday afternoon in the Garden of Eden. But what was an hour in Adam's time? What was an hour in the Garden of Eden before the fall?
Never not.
Never not. So, in other words, he had a lot of work to do. And these holy sparks that, as we explained last week, were trapped in some of the klipa. There was still contamination going around. And that was his job, to pick out and redeem those fallen fractal sparks. And this was the basis of all the work that he was supposed to do. It was therefore Adam's job to rectify and elevate these sparks through all the various activities of production and craftsmanship. As stated in the Midrash, all species of animals, birds, and fish were given to Adam as servants. He was to utilize each one in its respective natural habitat and in accord with the unique powers with which it was endowed. Fish were to be used to navigate the pathways of the oceans and to extract all the treasures buried in the depths of the seas. Once again, you need to start doing this in your own head. When you hear the word fish, you have to think hyperfish. Navigate, hypernavigation. Oceans, hyperoceans. Buried in the depths of the hyperseas.
Hyper treasures.
Hyper treasures, precisely. Hyper birds were to be used to ascend the highest heights in order to investigate and contemplate the wondrous wisdom with which God set the planets and the stars in their orbits. Adam was an astronomer. He was an astronaut. There was nothing in all of hyper reality that he was not intended to interact with, because the interaction was its elevation. In the same way, Adam was to utilize all the various animals and beasts, each one according to its nature. This was particularly true of the stronger animals and wild beasts whose prowess could be harnessed to perform all heavy work in mountains, hills, deserts, and other distant localities. And then that's the end of the quotation. And then I have summarized it in this paragraph. This then is the meaning of the biblical directive: be fruitful and multiply, replenish the earth and subdue it. Utilize the fish of the sea, the fowl of the heaven, and every living thing that crawls upon the earth. Replenish, subdue, and utilize allude here to the ability to elevate, to transform, and to rectify creation. This tikkun rectification involved elevating all the fallen sparks and shattered fragments of the primordial worlds that now lay scattered throughout all levels of time and space, and unifying them back into their source. This was Adam's work, and this is the meaning of the statement of the sages. That's stated in the Talmud. Mashiach ben David will not arrive until all the souls in the body will be completed. These souls are the sparks and fragments that must be elevated, integrated, and unified back into the universal body of archetypal man, the original Adam. This takes us up, leads us to another door that will open at another time, and that was that there was a special animal in the Garden of Eden that was custom crafted by the Creator to serve Adam and Chava, and it was truly Adam's best friend. And that is the untold story of the Nachash, who started out as a good guy, and boy, has he ever gotten a bad rap. But that is another story. Before we conclude, I want to review what we read to you last week. In our attempt to begin to understand the nature of what was the eating from the tree of knowledge, now that we have a little bit of a framework that we can appreciate. But now the question is even stronger. Well, heck, man, it was so clear what Adam was supposed to do, and it looks like relatively kind of simple. I mean, yeah, it was hard work, but it was very clear. What was he doing eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, especially when he had so much other stuff to do? Where did he even find time? That's because he went out working, and Chava was left at home with what Adam thought was his trusty best friend.
And that gave us music.
We explained last week that the concept of eating, there's three levels of eating. To begin to appreciate the eating from the tree of knowledge, we have to understand there's three kinds of eating. And there's the literal eating. Once again, it's not our eating because it's taking place in a hyperdimension, but it was, relative to that level, literally eating. Secondly, eating is a code word for intercourse, union. You find many examples of this in Scripture and in the words of the sages. And thus, the prohibition was not only on the actual literal eating of the tree of knowledge, but it was also the prohibition of having intercourse between Adam and Chava. But once again, it was a temporary prohibition. If they were to wait until nightfall, then not only would it be permitted to eat from the tree of knowledge on all levels, it would then have been a mitzvah, an obligation. This is what is one of the things that's very little known, that it was only a matter of time, and then it would have been the greatest act of man to eat from the tree of knowledge. That would have stimulated and crystallized the final completion of creation. And thirdly, the act of eating refers to intellectual eating. You are what you eat. In this sense, you are what you think. And the intellectual act of eating is where the true story, the full story of the eating from the tree of knowledge begins. In other words, when we open up on the scene and it looks like Adam and Chava are eating from the fruit, there's a whole other story that went on before that. And that was Adam's intellectual eating of the fruit, even before Chava enters the picture. And thus we see, from this perspective just now alone, that the responsibility of the onus of the eating from the tree of knowledge began not with Chava, as Christianity, unfortunately, tragically, has so much emphasized the evilness of the woman eating from the tree. It actually began with Adam. And so we see there's three modes of eating, and there's three modes of da'at. There's the literal da'at, meaning knowledge. There's the physical, in this sense, you are what you eat. That's the way of knowing through the food, the literal eating. There's carnal knowledge, and then there is the da'at, the knowledge of intellectual eating. Now, the word da'at means both unification and knowing. See how they're really one and the same thing? Eating is one and the same thing as knowing. There's three modes of knowing. They're also referred to as three modes of eating. This then is the basis that we're going to begin to explore the nature of the eating from the tree of knowledge, and we will then begin next week by laying out the foundation of answering the most perplexing question of all time: what did Adam think he was doing? What was Adam looking at? That's what we're going to see. Even before there's the eating, even before he had relations with Chava, he ate something in his mind. He looked at something that he should not have looked at. What was that? And why did he do that, which is so simply stated when the divine said, don't eat from it? That included the mental eating. Why did Adam apparently disobey the Creator on that point as well? And I'll just give you a quick preview, because we always got to keep Adam is our hero. You know, we always have to be matzdik Adam, to rectify, show that he was doing the right thing, but still there was a miscalculation, and that is that he was not forbidden to investigate the forces of the other side. He was only forbidden to physically, as it were, eat it, or to have union with it. But there was no prohibition against looking at it, studying it in the mind alone. So if you go to the museum, you got the railing, you got the glass wall, you look, just don't touch. Adam was permitted to look. He did not transgress God's prohibition, but the divine did say to Adam, it's not a good thing to do. Just trust me. Don't look. Even though it's not prohibited to look, don't look. Because the problem is, what you look at is where you are at. And as I mentioned last week, Adam, see, the garden was hermetically sealed. There was no evil contamination inside. That was the question, right? How did the cosmic virus get in the inside? It was in a world of pure absolute. Who let it in? How did it get in? There was a moat. Remember that moat? Who let it in? Adam let it in with a mind bridge. Anybody happen to see, since I recommended to see Alien? Anybody have the guts?
No.
Any men out there? Oh, okay. We got Ray saw it. You saw the scene, Ray? When he looks inside the pod and Dawn saw it? All right, good for you. Good for you. Well, that's what gives us a little idea of what happened with Adam. In this case, it was the ultimate case of the curiosity killed the cat. We will continue. We will continue in the ongoing drama of Adam next week. Are there any questions that can be answered in 2 minutes? All right, folks. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week. Laila Tov. Good night from Colorado Springs.